But no, like the text started out with saying like one of the first steps was to recognize danger signs.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that story. I was saying that was talking about how that was there was a series of other problems that BP had in the run up to the Deepwater Horizon that it sort of should have signaled that they should have known that the like operational standards weren't enough or correct.
Yeah, I watched that BP, the spill. I ended up just Googling it. And I guess the first incident was at Texas City. And there was an explosion, but they had reports earlier that they had outdated pipes that were rusting. And these started things called like blow down drums that weren't being updated. And that ended up having an explosion and killing some people. So they were trying to deal with that. And then they like literally 2 years later, they had another spill in Alaska where they were just trying to and not even try to inspect them properly. And then that led to also to another investigation. But almost in all those cases, they ended up just settling in court and no one was actually blamed. And I think the biggest tipping point was Deepwater Horizon when, you know, they had news outlets saying that it's not just bad luck, it's actually just bad management on their part.
Mm-hmm. Emergency situations, it's not if it's going to happen. It's going to happen eventually. And I was just surprised that, you know, being aware of it, nobody really did anything until the damage was already done. And then you have to, you know, kind of clean up the mess you make, and it makes you look pretty poor.
Right.
Yeah, and especially with like all the previous events, like you think they would just sort of had a better plan when something did happen. Like they would just have a better response to like something bad happening if they had a lot of practice with that.
Or even just like acknowledging that it was their fault. You know, could have been a step in the right direction.
I like how the idea of creating a crisis management plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I was working as a sales associate at one of my bookstores, we had a power outage, and I was the only manager at the time there, and I had no idea what to do. And I think that we ended up closing the store for like 3 hours because I was trying to contact my other managers and my store manager to find out how to reboot the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if we had a crisis management plan, that would have been prevented, or at least I would have had a better direction of where to go.
And one of the being able to recognize that there's a crisis, I think, is huge. Also, I spoke about it on the discussion board for this chapter, but at the community college I worked at, they rent like tables, like if a student is trying to like organize a club or something, and there was a girl who was trying to promote her like young Republican club, and some of the employees and like student life didn't want her to do that, and so they didn't agree with some of the things that she was saying, and so they basically told her, we're not going to rent you a table, and she got really angry, and they were like, oh well, it's not a problem, she'll get over it, but she's suing the school now for they violated her free speech, and they had a lot of opportunities to try to mediate the situation with her, and now it's so public, now it's in the newspaper, and they just didn't recognize it as a problem that can get bigger, and they didn't take initiative in the beginning to remedy the situation.
Yeah, I think a lot of like crises happen like in companies and like the school, like you were saying. I think a lot of crises happen at like the very lower level because sometimes I don't think companies try enough to tell their employees that like, like this could be a problem. Like you really need to like pick and choose your battles. Like that was just a battle that they shouldn't have chose to fight, because it's a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's kind of the company's fault, like for not setting better, like better situation scenarios.
I think the book even mentioned how a lot of the lower level employees won't say anything if there's an issue to their superiors, because and they think that a good way to prevent that would be to, create a trusting environment among the subordinates and the leaders.
I know I'm a hurricane's, coming at least near me. It'll probably fizzle out like always, but I'm supposed to work on Saturday, and so that's gonna, create an opportunity for Starbucks to show what they do during a crisis situation. I think it's always kind of like a last minute, do we close? Do we send people home? Do we kick the customers out? So that'll be kind of interesting unfolding. Are they going to make me drive there, if the roads are bad? So we'll see. I wish it would have already happened so I could talk about it. But.
Have they already talked about anything? Like, do they have any kind of plans? Do you know, or just kind of a
play it by ear?
Yeah, Starbucks, that's just sort of what they do. Like, we have really bad this winter, and they were just like, well, let's just see in the morning if you could drive there.
Yeah.
And so then they're talking to 5 people. And well, one of us made it, but 3 of us didn't, so now I'm here.
That's kind of funny, but kind of scary.
Yeah, no, somebody woke up and well, they're not here, but I'm here. It's well, one person can't go in, so. And that's sort of they should just have a better plan in advance instead of just being afraid to make a decision that says oh yeah, that's a bad idea to have people even risk driving out in this.
The university where I used to work and where my husband still works, they already said Thursday at 1 p.m. the school shut down. Friday it shut down. They'll resume classes Monday. So they already have a clear plan. I like that. That probably means that their outcome is going to be, good.
Let's see. This is kind of funny. It was under the section of post-crisis leadership and focusing on rebuilding the organization's image. And I thought it was funny how the book says denial is one tactic that organizational leaders can take. They can try to avoid blame by denying they were responsible or shifting their responsibility to somebody else. And, it was kind of interesting to read because we've been focusing so much on, leadership, that you hold yourself accountable and, admit when a mistake was made. And so I thought it was kind of amusing that the book said, well, you can also try to evade responsibility by denying it.
Yeah. Something that I thought of when I saw the crisis situations was when Chipotle was going through that E. coli outbreak. Do you guys remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I worked right next to a Chipotle, and it was just it was really interesting to see how all the employees react to it. They kind of brushed it off, and they were just oh, we're fine. We follow standards, But I mean, it kept happening, and I feel the lower level employees didn't really take anything seriously that Chipotle was doing. And Chipotle eventually they closed down all the stores for a whole entire day just to retrain all of their employees on safety standards, and they made them a lot more strict. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
That's one of the only things I could think of this whole chapter, because I was just remember when they were going through all that, and all the employees were so mad that they were being held accountable for the outbreaks, and not preparing food well.
Well, that is fair. I mean, if they're handling it, that.
Well, it was really interesting. To see Chipotle and how the followers just didn't really care, and I don't think Chipotle they weren't able to make it in the book it says that organizations need to say that there's a bigger problem and that there's a bigger potential risk. I don't think Chipotle was able to do that until they actually physically shut the stores down to do it. So it's just crazy, like the different precautions that companies have to take to get their employees to listen, you know?
Yeah, that's a good example of, in the prompt it says to talk about preparing leaders at all levels to respond to crisis. That's a good example of Chipotle kind of taking ownership of what had happened and showing to the public, like, hey, we're being responsible. You know, we know our employees aren't taking it seriously enough, so we're going to do something about it.
I think you guys should know that I just got an email right now that there is another oil leak by BP.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's in the North Sea near Scotland. Not as bad as Deepwater Horizon, but it's another leak.
Yeah. And another thing, I mean, these things keep happening, and I feel that there are certain corporations, like oil companies, for example, that, you know, they can try to repair their image, but I think that the general population doesn't, you know, just knows that they have so many problems, and so they may try to, you know, repair their image so much, but I don't think that, I think they're running out of chances to do that, especially in BP's case. You know, it's like, it's not even really that surprising when you hear something bad happening. There are just some organizations that seem to have a lot of emergency situations.
It's kind of like,
I think it's important. Sorry, go ahead.
It's just kind of like, as the public, it's just like, do we just like look at them and be like, oh, again, and just off, or like, do we get mad about it? Like, what do we do at this point? Like, they're just reckless, you know?
I was gonna say that I think, like, in order to repair an image, you'd think they would think about not letting it happen again. You know, that kind of just like drives it home. Yeah, we made the mistake again.
Yeah,
like, doesn't really look good.
Like hurricanes, for example, like Hurricane Katrina, how they knew that the levees were faulty and didn't do anything to fix it until it was, you know, too late. And then even that crisis was handled rather poorly, and especially in, you know, the Louisiana, you have to take into account extreme weather. I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier, something like that, you know?
Yeah, and like with Katrina, especially the city of New Orleans, someone should have just like had the courage to step up and say, you probably shouldn't remain here. Because whenever you're there, it feels like it's below sea level. It is below sea level. It's really prone. And a lot of times people are afraid to just coordinate something and tell people, like, you can't really stay here no matter how much you might want to. They're just afraid of backlash because they're publicly elected. So, like, it might miss and then nothing will happen. Everybody will be mad they left. But
right. And then that's like a good point. Panic that you're not prepared for.
That's what I was gonna add in, William, was that I know a lot of people, you know, here in Florida, when a hurricane comes, everybody's kind of just like, like, nothing will probably happen. But when we got the string of them, what was it, like, at least 10 years ago, and they were really bad with Charlie and all of those hurricanes. Everybody, the first couple that hit, everybody was like, well, you know, thinking nothing's really going to happen. And then all of a sudden, everybody at the same time had the realization of, oh, we should probably evacuate. And no one could get out because the traffic was too bad. Yeah. So, yeah, I think there's definitely a balance between your leader preparing you for a crisis and the followers actually following.
Yeah.